Churchill. Great day for Manitoba, great day for Canada. We've been working with the federal government over the course of the summer on trying to figure out where their interests are, and it's clear today that they have a lot of interest in Hudson Bay. So I think it's really exciting for us as a province to be able to play a role in building up Canada's economy for the next stage of us pushing back against Donald Trump. You know, we're speaking today at a time where we've started to see, even though the first half of the year we were able to hold off the tariff impact, last few weeks we started to see those GDP numbers, employment numbers across Canada start to show that our economy needs a jolt of life. And I think one of the ways that we can do that is by building up the full potential of Churchill. And one of the things that I really appreciated seeing the federal government talk about today, the Prime Minister mentioning in particular, but also their news release, is the idea of icebreakers being in Hudson Bay to help us have year-round shipping seasons here. Now, there's a lot of work that's going to have to happen. We got to think about wildlife, environment. Our Indigenous partner governments are going to have a lot of input in this process, but to see the Prime Minister of Canada, to see our federal government in Canada talk about Manitoba having a potential project of national importance. I don't know if we've had that since Manitoba entered Confederation, or perhaps since the railroads were constructed. So we're in a really exciting period where we have a great window of opportunity open. A lot of work left to do, absolutely. But the fact that we've got the ear of the Prime Minister, we have advocates in the federal cabinet, we are making progress towards building up this vision that's been talked about in Manitoba for so long, I think is a really exciting period.
So no disappointment that you're not in the first tranche?
Well, we've said all along, and particularly we've said to a lot of the leaders of Indigenous nations, that we're not going to use a C5 approach here in Manitoba. And that's because we know that the best way to get something built over the long term is by having those partner governments on side from representation of Indigenous community perspectives before things get launched, before things get built. And so I think that this is an affirmation of the approach that we're taking here in Manitoba, where the federal government is showing their support, showing the icebreakers, which only the federal government can build and get or bring to the table, that they're talking about that. I think that's a really, really positive sign, and it reflects that they're closely coordinated with where we're at in terms of this development process.
So what's the timeline then, if you would be in the second batch for future consideration?
Well, we're working through the timeline with some of our partners in the governments of Indigenous nations. I actually spent the morning with the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs today talking about this very topic. So it was interesting to get, texted updates on the one hand, but also to be very much diving into some details about how this could look for Indigenous government leaders. Timeline though, this fall, in terms of moving through next steps. For all the media attention, for all the editorials, for all the chatter about this, we haven't actually done a press release or press conference announcing what our approach is here. So for the federal government to say that they like what Manitoba has to offer Canada and what Manitoba can offer the rest of the world, I think is really exciting. And so we're making sure that our due diligence is strong. The questions about the environment are going to be really, really front of mind. And, I think over the coming months, you're going to get really excited about the vision as we announce this thing and build it up publicly in front of the province.
What kind of energy corridor are you envisioning for Hudson Bay or Churchill in particular?
Well, I think it's going to be up to Manitobans to decide. And of course, we know that Indigenous government leaders are going to have a lot to say. Folks concerned about the environment are going to have a lot to say. But after talking to a lot of potential proponents, after hearing from the various, economic experts that we've been engaging with, the big play for Manitoba is to go north to Hudson Bay. Like there's talks about an east-west line. You didn't really see much of that talk today. That wouldn't really benefit Manitoba a ton. For us, the big play is, can we get our port in the north going to help Canada get its resources to international markets? We've been pushing that. Today the federal government says, yeah, that's a great idea, and icebreakers could make that a year-round shipping season. And based on our conversations with some of the other provinces, I think us having that opportunity to get resources to market maybe opens up energy export opportunities for Manitoba Hydro across the prairies in Western Canada. You put those two things together, that's a really big economic win for Manitoba.
Vu qu'on est sur le sujet là, du port de Churchill, est-ce qu'on pourrait juste avoir votre réaction en français au fait que ce ne soit pas inclus dans la liste du gouvernement fédéral? Puis vous avez parlé aussi de brise-glace, là, si vous pouvez inclure ça dans votre réponse.
Oui, c'est une bonne journée pour Churchill, c'est une bonne journée pour le Manitoba et puis pour tout le Canada. Notre port au nord a la potentiel d'ajouter beaucoup d'activités économiques à notre pays. Et c'est pas juste une opportunité pour le Manitoba ou Saskatchewan, Alberta. Quand on parle des brise-glaces, des grands bateaux, maintenant, c'est une opportunité pour le Québec, Ontario, la Colombie-Britannique, tout partout dans la province. Alors, nous avons vraiment une opportunité de partager notre port avec le monde, avec le Canada.
Et ça ne vous dérange pas donc de ne pas être inclus dans les premiers projets?
Nous avons toujours dit qu'ici au Manitoba, nous n'utiliserons pas le projet de loi C5. Nous prenons une autre approche d'engagement, de consultation, et qu'on va utiliser cet chemin pour engager avec le gouvernement fédéral. Aujourd'hui, nous voyons que le gouvernement fédéral nous écoute comme une province et que notre grand plan économique a de l'appui à l'Ottawa.
Premier, speaking of including Indigenous communities in this process going forward, the federal government announced a new Indigenous Advisory Council. We found out that the MMF were part of this, but no First Nation leadership is currently part of this council. Do you have any comments to that?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I think it is a missed opportunity to not include a Manitoba First Nations representative on this Indigenous Advisory Council. And so when I have the chance to speak with federal ministers tomorrow and the Prime Minister, spoke to the Prime Minister earlier today, but I'm sure that we'll talk again soon. This is a point that I'll raise because again, here in Manitoba, our context is absolutely the MMF is going to have a role as a Métis government, but the First Nations have to be given that opportunity to engage. They have to have inclusion. So again, today, really encouraged and happy to hear what the federal government is bringing forward, how they're acknowledging the opportunity that we have in Churchill. And as part of having a good working relationship, sometimes you tell your friends, hey, I think maybe this thing could have gone a little differently. And in this case, I think that Indigenous Advisory Circle, or Council rather, really could have benefited from having a voice from a Manitoba First Nation.
You mentioned environmental concerns.
Yeah.
How concerned are you that even the blue skying, very general talk you've had about LNG or potentially crude through Hudson Bay may have turned off or disappointed portions of the ADP base or other Manitobans that would have wanted to see more of a focus on the environment?
I think it's really important that we also see, so Churchill, you guys are focused on that, rightfully so, that's huge. There's another project of national importance that Manitoba has in the mix here, which is the all-weather road. And really it's a network, because we're talking about Shemanawa, the Dene First Nations, Eastside communities, so many other communities. When we get to that level, we're talking about the poorest communities in Canada in some cases. We're talking about the poorest kids in Canada. And so the question that I have for folks who are thinking about the environment and the economy is, we can balance those considerations, but how are we going to build the infrastructure to connect the poorest people in our province to opportunity? And that is an all-weather road. And so why have I started to talk about an energy corridor, talking about using shipments of energy products out of Hudson Bay? It's because if we look at the provincial infrastructure, we look at the interests of the federal government, they're never going to build an all-weather road together. But if we get major development in the north, that's how we can start to connect these communities with more opportunity. So again, I'm glad you're raising this issue because part and parcel of us as Manitobans answering the question of how are we going to ensure that we're protecting the environment coming out of this devastating wildfire season in an era of climate change while also embracing economic opportunity. To me, it has to be a common sense conversation about how are we going to pay for the infrastructure that we need to have a rising tide lift all boats in Manitoba. And so clearly, we need to have an answer for a young kid growing up in poverty on the Northern First Nation about how we're going to make sure that they're part of Canada's growing economy while we're protecting our economy for Trump. And after looking at all the details, I think that Hudson Bay development gives us that opportunity. And what you're going to see as we roll this thing out publicly over the coming weeks and months, hopefully will give you that confidence that we're moving in the right direction for the economy, for the environment, but also to give opportunity to everybody in Manitoba.
And on that note, do you stand by the comments you made about York Factory First Nation in the summer, saying that you'd consider this all-weather connection, a bridge to the community, if they were more supportive of resource extraction projects?
I don't think that's a characterization of my opinion then or now, because my belief is it's just about being somebody who's building a budget, right? All-weather road network in northern Manitoba is $5 billion. Our existing infrastructure budget at the province is $540 million. So building that road network without a resource play means nothing else in Manitoba gets built for 10 years. There's the challenge. The challenge is about numbers and making it work. But all of a sudden, if there's a huge level of investment, if the federal government is building an icebreaker for Hudson Bay, which is like an $8 billion shipbuilding project, if we're constructing the next generation of port and other infrastructure, if we're building an energy corridor, we're talking about tens of billions of dollars of investment. Now all of a sudden, a $5 billion road network is in the realm of the possible. So again, the ideas are connected. It's not necessarily conditional, but the ideas are just, how are you going to pay for it, right? Everything that everybody wants, great ideas. Everything that we want to do in terms of climate change, great ideas. How are we going to pay for it? And in this case, it's very clear that there's demand in Europe right now. The EU is trying to get away from Russian gas because of the war in Ukraine. Right now, Canadian products are going down through Trump's America and being shipped out of Louisiana on the Gulf Coast because they have the infrastructure. At the same time, we've got some of the poorest kids in the country in northern Manitoba who cannot drive to a school, who cannot drive to college, who cannot drive to a store. And so it might be that we decide collectively as a province, nope, we're not going to build anything, those kids can stay there, and we're going to keep shipping this product, which everyone uses. Every single person here uses natural gas, right? And we're going to ship it through the States and let Trump and company make money. Or we could say, you know, we're going to decouple, we're going to turn away from the U.S., we're going to connect folks with opportunity in northern Manitoba, and by the way, we're going to build up the Canadian economy.
Would you look at starting a corporation to handle these projects?
Announcements that we make in the coming weeks. Today, it's a good day for Churchill, good day for Canada, good day for Manitoba.
Is an LNG facility at Port Nelson still a possibility in your mind?
I think right now, all things are possible. The main piece that I pay attention to here, you'll have to do the research. How many years people have been talking about Churchill? Probably at least a decade, probably multiple decades in terms of the opportunities there. Port Nelson too, right? Like that goes back 100 years, that idea. But again, right now, the idea of using Hudson Bay in Manitoba as a catalyst to grow our province, to grow the Canadian economy, and all of a sudden, for once, we've got a federal government paying attention. That's exciting because it can bring the resources necessary to have a level of construction we couldn't do on our own. Province of Manitoba, we can make sure the rail line and the port and Churchill are going to keep working for the coming years, but we can't afford to buy an $8 billion icebreaker to open that shipping season year-round. The federal government can't. They've got a number of icebreakers on order already. So with Prime Minister Carney making this announcement today, him doing this wheeling and dealing with other provinces like Alberta, all of a sudden, little old Manitoba, we're looking pretty good as a pathway for all the economy that Canada wants to build, getting to the European Union, getting to other international markets. Quelle partie?
Le bout de, vous avez les moyens de faire fonctionner une chemin de fer et un port,
Oui.
et pas d'acheter un bateau ou un peu de place avec $1 milliard.
Oui. Alors, en tant que la province du Manitoba, nous pourrons continuer d'investir dans le chemin de fer, dans le port à Churchill, mais nous n'avons pas les ressources pour acheter une brise-glace, soit au Québec ou en Ontario ou quoi que ce soit. Mais maintenant, avec le gouvernement fédéral, nous avons la chance d'avoir beaucoup plus d'investissements. Et puis, le gouvernement fédéral a déjà commandé des brise-glaces pour ajouter ça. Puis, avec ces moyens comme ça, le secteur privé va faire des investissements aussi. Et maintenant, le Manitoba, c'est une grande opportunité où ce que nous pourrons être la manière où l'Alberta, Saskatchewan, les autres provinces pourront rejoindre l'Union européenne ou des autres marchés internationaux.
Minister Moise said this week, Minister Salah said this week that Minister Moise is working on a new climate change
Yeah.
plan. How much does ADA address future concerns with Hudson Bay and the use of fossil fuels as a potential transshipment product, as well as, again, concerns that Manitobans might be having about facilitating fossil fuel shipments?
Absolutely. It's all connected. It's all got to be one part of one shared decision that we make as a province. Manitoba is on a path to net zero, hopefully on the way to net negative. Meaning hopefully our economic activity here in Manitoba within our lifetimes actually contributes to lowering global greenhouse gas emissions. Part of that can be, let's say we ship energy west and we displace coal generation in some of our neighboring provinces. Maybe we're even going to help international markets displace GHG emissions with the projects that we're talking about here. But I also want to make clear that within our own borders, that we are going to be moving step for step with the environment and the economy in mind. So if we do ensure that we're moving forward with this economic opportunity that the Prime Minister is galvanizing attention towards in Churchill today, we're going to move forward with the path to net zero. We're going to move forward with 30 by 30. We're going to move forward with ensuring that we're doing conservation so that there's a safe, clean, and healthy environment for future generations. We can do both of those things at the same time. I think we have a responsibility on the environment that's very, very clear. But we also have a responsibility to people across Manitoba, kids who need opportunity today in the north, but also future generations who are going to want the infrastructure built that they can scaffold subsequent levels of opportunity on in the future. What does that mean? That means 50 years from now, 100 years from now, there's going to be a ton of activity in northern Manitoba. And in order for your kids and our kids and grandkids to be able to take advantage of that opportunity today, we need to start building the infrastructure. So we're very excited about a port and rail line as a phase one. We're working with the feds and Indigenous governments to build a phase two, which is most likely an energy corridor accessing Hudson Bay, but that's not the end goal. The end goal is to really make Manitoba a have province. And these are just the first two steps towards a multi-step process of bringing home that opportunity for everybody in Manitoba.
Manitoba is not a half province, and the Prime Minister has said that there's going to be an austerity budget, and Manitoba relies heavily on transfers from the federal government. So how concerned are you about what's going to happen with this austerity budget?
I think I'm like every other hardworking Manitoban, which is I recognize that we need equalization payments today, but I'm so proud of this place that in the future, I would like us to be paying into equalization for the benefit of other provinces. You do the math, just back of the envelope, the size of our provincial economy, maybe $75 billion in a given year. If we get $30 billion of investment for an energy corridor plus an $8 billion icebreaker, that's basically half the size of our provincial economy. Even if you stretch that out over a 10-year construction period, maybe it's 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is, you're talking about adding 5% GDP growth to Manitoba. This is how you make Manitoba a have province in our working careers. There is one trajectory to becoming a have province by 2040, where we just keep doing more of the same. We lean into our diversified economy, manufacturing, ag, finance, transportation, and so on. And we just grow it by a few percent a year, and we just add more people to the workforce, grow the economy at a slightly faster rate than our neighbors. And then when your kids are reaching retirement age, we'll become a have province.
But what about the current?
But this plan, with a port in Churchill, a corridor in the north, can make Manitoba a have province in 5 years, within 10 years.
Forgive me for stepping on you there. What is the plan, though, to further answer Carol's question, though? What will be the effect on the remainder of this fiscal and the coming fiscal if there is a significant reduction in transfers?
Well, no, I just take the Prime Minister at his word. Like, they've already given us the numbers for this current fiscal year that we're in, and what I heard from the announcement today is that existing agreements will be honored.
And for next fiscal, I mean, they've been growing transfers that have been allowing Manitoba to keep its deficit within its current range, so.
Yeah, well, that's why we get elected, is to solve tough challenges. And so far, we got a great working relationship with the federal government. And the most important thing that we can get out of the feds right now, get us that icebreaker, get us private sector investment so that we can put the food on our table for ourselves. Equalization is great this year and next year, but hey, if we could leave behind a legacy by the time our kids are in the prime of their working years, where we are a half province, I think that's a pretty strong incentive for all of us to pursue this opportunity. That's why we're talking about Churchill. That's why we're talking about the North. And yeah, we are going to have to take careful consideration of the environment. Beluga, polar bears, climate change, all of that stuff. We all want a safe, clean, healthy environment for the future. But at the same time, we can do it. We can leave a safe, clean, healthy environment for the future generations while also ensuring that Manitoba is not always considered a have-not province, that we're not always impoverished, quote unquote, relative to our provincial neighbors. Let's choose a path of prosperity and just work damn hard along the way that we take care of the environment while we do it.
The Prime Minister said that there would be an announcement in Winnipeg at or before the Grey Cup. Are you expecting that you and he are going to be announcing an icebreaker and all-weather roads at the Grey Cup this year?
I mean, this is such an exciting day with the federal government saying that they want to lean into Churchill. I think my first ask will be about his comments about McDavid yesterday and just saying, does that mean you're willing to fund him to come to the Jets too? Or is that just strictly an Edmonton comment that he was making? So, all things are possible right now, even McDavid coming to Winnipeg. But one thing's a lock, and that's we're bringing the Stanley Cup home this year. So hopefully not just the Grey Cup announcement, but the Stanley Cup announcement that the Prime Minister referred to today will all be happening in Winnipeg.
What are you going to do? What are you going to do if, as promised, Bloodvein First Nation on the 15th bars licensed moose hunters from the territory?
Well, to me, the treaties are about sharing. And that's what I told the chief of Bloodvein when I had a chance to speak to her earlier today. So our Minister of Natural Resources and Indigenous Futures, which has the conservation portfolio, is perhaps, I believe, meeting with her even as we speak. I think they were supposed to have a sidebar chat at the meeting we were at earlier today. So at this point, just going to make sure that we work towards a political solution and make sure that all Manitobans can enjoy the land and the animals.
So you yourself won't take any action?
Well, don't tempt me with a good time, Bartley, if you're encouraging me to go hunt a moose. And my political staff will freak out because they don't want you to have a photo of me with a gun, even though I'm a licensed gun owner. But sure, we can talk again on Monday, I guess.
I was referring to any action regarding the First Nation.
And you see where my mind's at, right? I get it why people are so interested in this. Moose meat is the best tasting wild meat that there is. I would say probably the best tasting meat, period. But again, maybe there's room to account for different tastes.
And completely unrelated story. Do you have any comment on the search warrants that indicated that Alamos Gold's burn pile was responsible for the fire at Lynn Lake?
Yeah, saw the story today. Pretty concerning. And my heart goes out to community members and Mayor Dulowich, navigating through this tough period, fighting the fires directly, hats off to local leaders like him. So, yeah, I think it's very concerning. It is through that investigatory process right now, so I'll refrain from maybe making too many comments, but I am glad that the fire investigators are looking very, very closely at this and that's moving forward.
When a reporter asked you about this at a press conference May 28th, when there was the state of emergency declared, you seemed kind of defensive and questioned, or stressed how important it was for journalistic standards to be followed. Mm-hmm. And at that time, knowing what you know now, do you think you owe that reporter an apology?
One of the biggest lessons from the wildfire season is that misinformation is one of the true challenges that comes up. Like, I can't count how many times, we're up in the middle of the night, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., calls and texts. Our houses are on fire, but it turns out that the houses are not on fire. And then it triggers like a whole bunch of outreach that local leaders, that EMO people, people such as ourselves in political office have to do to tamp down misinformation. In that instance, I asked a number of clarifying questions to see what the basis of the assertion was, and the reporter did not have it. In this case, the reporting has a substantive basis, and so I'm happy to engage with the topic in that way.
On peut avoir la réponse en français, s'il vous plaît.
Oui, c'est une situation qui met les communautés comme Lynn Lake au défi. Et puis moi, je suis encouragé que l'investigation nous a mené à ce point-ci et qui va continuer.
Mais par rapport à la reporter, parce que c'est un reporter de
Oui, bien, il y avait des questions qui étaient avancées. J'ai demandé où étaient les faits pour avancer ces questions et puis il n'était pas capable de me dire.
Anything else? All right, thanks, folks.
All right. McDavid on page 1, I guess.